Well, I know you were here with Fawn just under 2 years ago discussing your previous book, 14 Talks by Age 14. And since sharing that message about having the right conversations with kids at the right time, I would love to hear about how your message has evolved and just what was your inspiration for creating this book?
So that's a great question. I really came at this book kind of through the side door. I wasn't thinking originally about setbacks or about failures. I was initially really interested in the concept of coming of age. I've always been interested in this. What is it that causes kids to cross the threshold from being a child to being an adult, and where does that happen? So I just started doing a ton of research into that, and I studied it some in college, so it was interesting to me. From that, I started talking to parents who are in my parenting group on Facebook. We have 12,000 members, and they're from across the country. And so what emerged from all of that sort of research, anecdotal and otherwise, was that I came to a realization that one of the things that we are missing, I think, culturally now, is an acceptance and an understanding of the fact that becoming an adult requires really screwing up. And it often requires really screwing up publicly these days, and then learning something about yourself and then taking that, what you learn about yourself, and becoming a better person, and then making your community a better community. So that's what kind of inspired me to write the book, and then all the conversations that I had with the parents in my group about the experiences they had with their kids when they screwed up, or when they faced a challenge or an obstacle, were just so incredible that I felt like, well, we've got to share this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And did you know, going into that research, so you have, we'll get into later, 8 different archetypal failures. Did you have in mind what those failures were? Did you know what you were looking for? Were there surprises that you encountered?
I didn't know going into it. I mean, I sort of had some idea of what I'd seen my kids go through, what I went through, what my friends' kids had gone through. So I knew initially sort of some, like a real rough idea of 3 or 4 things where I was noticing trends, mm-hmm. right? But I learned a lot. I learned a lot from the people I interviewed and talked with, and there were some surprises. Some of the things that surprised me were the more subtle challenges that kids face. I mean, these archetypes that you mentioned, there are 8 different archetypes in the book of sort of typical teenage experiences with failure. And I know that word failure can be a little bit upsetting to people. They're like, oh, don't call it a failure. But the reason that I use that word is because when a child is feeling unmoored, incompetent, helpless, they feel like they're failing at the time. So it's an experience of feeling like you're failing. And so some of them are real obvious. You know that if a kid sends a nude and people find out about it, then the whole community's talking about it, and that's something that is easy to spot. Okay, that was a real mess up, and we've got to figure out what to do now. What was surprising were the things that you don't hear about because kids are pretty good at hiding it, and that would be things like parents who told me, my kid is suffering from a real lack of confidence. They do not believe in themselves. I'm seeing them on this big decline. I can sort of pinpoint when it happened, but we don't know how to climb out from this hole. Mm-hmm. So that was really surprising.
Yeah. And I think ourselves, we can be really hard on ourselves when our children are experiencing these failures or having a hard time,
right.
When they do something wrong. And I think we tend to see that as a reflection of our parenting. It can feel pretty easy to take on this view that our child's misstep is a reflection of us, especially when we're trying so hard to instill good values in our kids and really working with them on that. You make a point of sharing in your book that having strong values won't always insulate your child from certain failures. Can you speak to that a little bit, and maybe how parents can start to reframe this type of narrative and separate themselves and their children even from the failure?
Sure. So that's kind of a 2-part question in my brain. The one part that's about the values, mm-hmm. I'll address that first. So some of the parents who I work with, I've been doing this work for 20 years. And some of the parents who I work with will say, but, my kid's in sports, and we make sure that they're in a lot of activities, so they don't really have time to make these big mistakes. But we take our kid to church every Sunday, but my kid volunteers, and so surely that's helping to insulate them from some of the things that you're worried about. And the fact is that it doesn't, and that's okay. Really, the main message of the book is that I really want your kids to screw up. It's really good for them, and it's really good for the community when a child makes a mistake and they learn from it and they become a better person from it. So the idea that we think we are insulating and protecting our kids because we have a certain set of values is a way of comforting ourselves. And I'm not saying having values are bad, and I'm not saying that any of those things that parents do to instill values in their kids are bad, but they are not vaccines against messing up. They're not. So that's one piece. And then the other thing, so you asked about
separating kind of the parent and the child from the failure.
So much of our identity as a parent is wrapped up in how our kid performs, right? So I think there's a great deal of struggle in parenting today where we're really afraid to talk about the challenges that our families are going through because it's embarrassing, or there might be a little bit of shame or guilt or regret, or we're really afraid that other parents are going to judge us. Mm-hmm. So it's one thing to be protective of our child's missteps. I don't want you to feel like you have to go out and broadcast whenever your kid makes a mistake. But what I encourage in the book is something I call the whisper network. So finding another parent who you can talk to about what you're going through. Every parent I interviewed for this book, I whittled down this huge group into 30 families, and I interviewed them about their experiences. And to a parent, they all said the moment they started feeling better about what their kid was experiencing was the moment they talked to someone about it. So if you can find someone to say, we're struggling with this, whether that's I'm struggling with my child having a lack of confidence, I'm struggling with the fact that my child cannot seem to follow the rules when they're at home, I'm struggling with the fact that my child is having an unhealthy relationship with food, or is experimenting with drinking, or whatever it might be, using social media inappropriately. If you can find someone to say that out loud to, your burden will begin to lift, and then that person can point you in the direction of some resources that might be helpful to you, or oftentimes another parent who would like to talk to you about their experience. Many parents who I have worked with have said, please use me. If you know someone who is going through this that I went through, I really want to pass on what I learned.
Yeah, the Whisper Network was probably the part I highlighted the most.
Oh, good.
I really loved that part, and it can be really hard. It's lonely when you don't know who else is going through something that you are going through, or have a child that's going through the same thing. How do you, maybe in your research you found, how have parents been most successful in finding their Whisper Network if they don't know who to go to at first?
You sort of know who to trust. You sort of can get a vibe. I think, and maybe it's just a friend, and you don't suspect that they have any knowledge of this, in their own lives, but they may know someone, and if they don't, they're going to find out for you very discreetly and kind of start asking around. So it's a little bit of a hit or miss thing. It just so happens that because I do this work, I tend to be an aggregate of these people where I live, and so people will come to me a lot and say, I need to talk to someone who's been through whatever, fill in the blank. But in every community, I feel like there is someone, whether it's a social worker or a counselor or just that parent who's kind of plugged in, and they're often so happy to get you pointed in the right direction and say, you know what, I'd heard from a friend that this other friend was struggling with the same thing, and I think you two should talk and trade numbers.
Yeah, I love the idea of that being like a network that's just spreading and spreading. Once you know you're not alone, you're willing to help someone else, and you want to do that when someone's done that for you.
Really want to do that, and I see that in the group all the time. People on Facebook, people posting, I went through this, and I can talk to someone if they need it. Yeah.
Is that something that you have found as a society? So you shared with us kind of how you define failure or setback in this book. Have you found that as a society, in the last few years or in the past decades that we're making any progress on accepting these mistakes or being more forthcoming with sharing these?
Not yet.
Not yet.
That's really why I wrote the book, because the feeling I want you to leave with tonight is relief. I want you to walk out the door tonight feeling like whatever setback your child is facing, and every child's going to face some setback of some kind, that is sort of normalized for you, that you realize that it's not out of the ordinary, probably, even if their behavior is sort of unique or their circumstance is unique. Kids really need to experience something that causes them to have to get comfortable with discomfort. They need that to be good adults. And so I want you to feel, at least take a little bit of comfort in that some good will come out of it, and that probably you're not alone and not as unique as you think in your circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love in the beginning of your book, you share a list of markers of success.
Yeah.
You have so many different lists that I would like to cut out and just have around my
I
house,
love
actually.
a list. I love a list.
So the markers of success, I think a lot of times, especially where we live, where we are right now, we have a pretty narrow view of what success looks like. What would you say is most important in this regard for us to keep in mind as we're raising our children?
If one thing from that list, if I could pick one thing, it would be it's when a child feels like they can make a contribution. Mm-hmm. So whether that's to their peer group or to their family or to their sports team or to their neighborhood, kids feel a sense of purpose. They don't have to be the best on the team. This is something actually that my husband used to say to our kids when they were younger and they were playing sports, and I love this. He would always say, I was never the best kid on the team, but I was always the best teammate, and that was my contribution. Mm. And so we always talked in our family about what's your contribution? What's the thing that you can bring? And you know, maybe you're not gonna hit the home run. That's great, who cares? We don't care about that. But if you're cheering your teammates on when they go up to bat, awesome. You've made a really important contribution to your team. So that's the one from that list that to me is the most important.
Yeah. Another one of your lists that I love is in the Child's Bill of Rights that you talk about. So you write about this idea of keeping our kids safe while allowing them to take risks, and I think we can get so focused on taking care of and supporting our children, but we need to make sure that we're leaving room for them to grow and to learn from these mistakes that they're making. And in chapter 3 of your book, you offer us, I quote, a living document, much like the Constitution, that can grow with your child, your circumstances, and the world we live in, with the intent of protecting your teens' needs along with your families, to serve as a guide for making decisions and rules that affect you and your child, and to clearly set goals and boundaries in otherwise unexplored territories. So I would buy the book just to have that Bill of Rights.
And you can cut it out at the back of the book. That's the one list in the book where there's a little thing at the back that you can cut out and hang it up on your fridge if you want.
Yeah, and I think it can be really scary when kids are going through these different types of failures, and it's a range of how serious they are, but to keep in mind the rights that they need to have to be able to grow from these experiences. I'd love to hear, what do you hope a parent's biggest takeaway from those Bill of Rights might be?
Well, I think our instinct as parents is safety first, right? We really, if our kid has screwed up, we want to be sure that we are keeping them safe. And oftentimes, keeping a kid safe backfires and makes them less safe. And I know that doesn't sound like that makes any sense right off the bat. But the idea is this, that kids really need to take a lot of risks. They need to take risks to become independent. And for most parents, that's the goal. We want to raise kids who become independent and can live on without us, right? And in order to do that, that's a lot of risk taking. That's a lot of saying, should I learn how to get my driver's license? I don't know, that's really scary. Should I take this class that where I might not be the smartest in the class? I don't know, that's pretty scary. Should I audition for the play? Should I sneak out and hang out with my friends, right? So all of these risks in your child's mind are kind of created equal, even though you really like the one that was auditioned for the play. They might choose the one that's like sneaking out to be with their friends. But the point is that they need to take risks in order to grow and in order to become independent. And so when we see that our kid is in a setback, when they have made a decision, or when life has thrown something at them that is a little bit dangerous or that feels painful or we know is going to be uncomfortable, we want to come in and we want to wrap them up in bubble wrap and keep them safe. And that stagnates growth. And it can also make them sort of feel stuck in that failure state. So the Bill of Rights is about creating opportunities for kids to continue to become independent. And often that means making the same mistake more than once, which stinks, but that's how kids learn. And it means doing things like having a right to privacy, even if that makes you nervous. Having a right to pick their friends, even if that makes you nervous. So I tell parents with this Bill of Rights to sort of tiptoe to the edge of their comfort zone and then take 2 tiny more steps. And that's probably best for the child.
Mm. And you mentioned at the end of the chapter where these are written that not all children experience these rights in the same way. How they identify, how they present in the world, race, everything can affect this. Before we move into the work of how we can turn these failures into successes, do you feel like there's more we should know? What else should we know from your research about how differently adolescents might experience these rights?
Well, so I didn't want to create this Bill of Rights that says things like your child should be allowed to freely explore the world, and it doesn't really say that, freely explore the world. There are limits to the Bill of Rights, and certainly there are moments where you will say this right is we're not going to give you access to this one right now because of what just happened, or you're not ready for this. So there's tons of room in there for you as the parent to say we're incrementally allowing more of this right or not, just the way rights work, civically. But I did not want that to come across as naive. So there is a section after that just says, not all kids are treated the same when they go out into the world. And if you are the parent of a child who is transgender or who is brown or black skinned, then you know this. You know that your child might not be treated by adults in the same way that other children are treated. And I put that in there not just as like you know it, we all know it, but really because we have a responsibility as members of a community to take care of all of the children in it, and all kids will be safer if we all recognize that truth, and if we all are more protective of the kids in our community. It's another big sort of theme of this book, is that we're all raising these kids together. And the more we're vulnerable with each other about what we're going through, the more we can be supportive. The more we're willing to admit what we are going through with each other, that's the moment we start to feel better. And the more we can protect each other's children as much as we're protecting our own, the safer all kids will be. So that's what that was about.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So I'd love to get into the second part of your work then, the 8 archetypal failures. I love how you structure these chapters, and I'd love to hear about the 3-step process. Can you kind of talk us through that?
Sure. So, I'll step back first and tell you that the way that the book is structured is the first 5 chapters are kind of the foundation. I want you to understand how failure functions, what it's doing in your kid's brain when they feel like they're having a failure or a setback, why it's good for them, what you can do as a parent to help your child from feeling stuck in that moment, what you can do that might make your child feel more stuck in that moment. So what are the to-dos and what are the to-don'ts? That's the first 5 chapters. The next 8 chapters, each one is devoted to an archetype. So a sort of cast of characters, 8 different types of adolescents, and really this book is for parents of kids ages 8 to 18. So you will start to see these kind of emerge even in mid-elementary school, all the way through adolescence, so really beyond 18. And each chapter is devoted to, after having talked to the parents in my group, what sort of themes and trends emerged as kind of most common. So there's the rebel, and they fail to follow the rules, and there's the daredevil, and they fail to take care of their body, and there's the loner, and they're failing to connect with their peers, and so there are 8 of these. And these are all little anecdotes from parents who I interviewed, their real experiences with their child going through one of these types of failures. But the 3-step process that you asked about, that is consistent. So within each of these chapters, you'll have a very different story, a kid of a very different age with a real different experience. And then we will lay over that the contain, resolve, and evolve 3-step process. So should I go into that now? Okay. Yeah. All right. So this is really, when I say what matters most when your child has this kind of experience is how you react, this is how you react. So the first step in the process is to contain the problem. So you're facing some kind of a failure experience, a setback with your child. You've got to sort of do a little triage and stop the bleeding at this point. Contain might mean that I have to contain a problem that's coming at my kid. Maybe they're getting harassed online, and so I'm going to have to put up some boundaries around technology. Or contain could mean I need to contain the actual child because they're making some bad decisions when they go out on the weekends. So that might sound like, hey, we're not going out this weekend. We need to sort of pump the brakes here and reassess what's going on. What I have found is that most parents do contain, and they're like, cool. I have stopped the bleeding. Now I can go over to the next problem in my life, right? When I talk about the importance of helping kids move past this, we don't want their experience to be the headline of their childhood. We really want it to be a launchpad for growth. The second phase, resolve, is where that happens. So we know from lots of research that when a child experiences something painful, when any person experiences something painful, the default to that is helplessness. That is our default mode. So we're sort of like, well, I guess this is it now. I guess I am a loser, I'm a loner, they see me as the rebel, I'm the whatever, right? You don't want that. So these archetypes are meant to be sort of moments and spaces that your child will pass through. For a little while they might be one, and then for a little while they might be another. Well, I don't want any kid to feel typecast, like that's who they are forever and ever. The way that they get past that is the second stage, resolve, and that's where they take some action. So talk about lists. There's a menu.
That's a good one. That's a good list.
There's a menu in this section of the book that you can look at and choose from, and these are actions your child can take to start to move past this feeling of feeling like a failure. And they're not for you to take, but they are there for you to talk about with your child and to help them assess which one they're most comfortable with. So, and there's a huge range in these options. It might be that they need to apologize.
I was going to say that was actually my favorite one, how to give a good apology.
Yes. So it's not just make your kid apologize, but it's how do you do that? What does a real apology sound like, and what does a bad apology sound like? So sort of training them up in that, and it's a great thing for us to be modeling, by the way, as well. So, so it might be that, or maybe your child just has sort of a misunderstanding of something, and they just need more information or more education about something. So that's another option, getting better educated on something. Maybe they need to have a clarifying discussion with someone. Maybe they need to seek, a counselor to get more insight. So there are loads of options in there. It almost doesn't matter what your child chooses, because the key to getting over this feeling of helplessness, of failure, is action. And so it's not about getting it right. It's not about choosing from this menu and hoping, oh, I hope it's apology. I hope I'm picking the right one. It's really about showing your child that they're not stuck there, that there's something they can do to move past it. So they pick one or two, and often I say that's like a mandatory part of the phase, that they do something. And that's when kids start to feel like, okay, I'm not helpless, things aren't hopeless. I'm learning that I bounce. I'm learning that when things are really painful for me, my feelings are big and things are uncomfortable, I can do something. And then the third step is evolve. For me, that's my favorite step. I love this one. That's your step, actually, more than the child's. So evolve means you put this in the rearview mirror. You don't keep talking about it. You don't press on the bruise and keep asking. You don't keep reminding your kid about the time they screwed up. That's how we make sure that they move past this into better territory. And I'll tell you the two archetypes where I find parents most often are tempted to keep pressing the bruise. It's the loner, so it's the child who's failing to connect with their peers. And that will sound like a parent saying, hey, how about that girl in your math class? You mentioned that she seemed pretty nice. Did you want to try to invite her over? So it's like you think you're just being nice, but to your child, that sounds like pressure, and it also sounds like you don't believe that they're capable of finding friends on their own. And the other one that I think parents get really stuck in and not able to evolve past is the daredevil. So when a child has done something that might hurt their own body, they're failing to take care of their body. So maybe they refuse to wear a helmet when they skateboard, or maybe they are binge drinking, whatever it is. We're so frightened that we think if we keep asking, that's sort of a way of protecting us and them. So they're headed out the door and we're like, I don't want to get another phone call like I got last time. I want you to be sure that you're being really safe. And that kid can end up going, I guess this is who I am, right? They'll always see me this way, so we don't want that.
Yeah. And I was thinking too, it seems without lots of practice in this 3-step process, it can be really easy to get stuck in one of these steps for a parent. You talk early in your book about response styles and kind of the fight or flight or fawn and freeze. I'm curious about the advice you would give parents so that they can make sure that these failures turn into setbacks and they help bring about this opportunity to learn. Because I imagine there are many ways for us to interfere with the learning process, some of what you were mentioning. What are some of the other traps that there are for us to avoid?
Okay, I'm so glad you asked that. So the 4 things that she mentioned are the 4 that you've probably heard of a million times. So fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And so often in our parenting, the things that cause us the most worry are the things that we recall from our own childhood with some sense of shame or guilt or fear or pain, right? And so we tend to react to our child's experience the way we reacted when we were a kid. So if you were a people pleaser when you were little, because that's what kept things nice in your house, then you're going to really fawn over a situation and keep pressing the bruise and keep worrying about the friendship because you really just want everyone to be happy, right? So there's a section in the book that kind of walks you through making sure that you're choosing the right tool, the right reaction for the situation, because just because a tool worked really well for you once in your life, and I'm thankful that that tool did when you were a child, says the people pleaser, like that's me, I got that, it might not be the right one for this occasion. So that's one thing you can do. The other thing that I think is most important to remember so that you can evolve, so that your child can move on past this and not get stuck, is that you don't want to sacrifice your relationship with your child in order to teach them a lesson. And what I mean by that is so often you know what's right. You know the right thing to do. You know how they could get out of this situation. You know how they could make it better. You know what they shouldn't have done in the first place. We have all of this earned wisdom that our kids don't have. And so it's very tempting to want to say, open your eyes, open your ears, do what I'm telling you to do, and this will be fine. And that can create a real combatant sort of situation between you and your child. So I'll give you an example from my own life, and this is like a super minor one. My son, my kids are now 21 and 23. My son had braces for 7 years of his life. He had some crazy stuff going on. And so he had 3 years and then off and then 4 years. And so by the time he was done with braces, he was done. And he refused to wear his retainer. So this is a terrible situation because all that time put in and his teeth looked beautiful, all that money, all that, driving to the orthodontist. And in the beginning, it drove me crazy. And I wanted to be able to convince him to wear the retainer. I wanted to hold the retainer in his mouth, like just keep this in there. But I just made a decision that my relationship with my son was more important than him having straight teeth. I did what I could do. I paid for the braces and I took him to the orthodontist. That was my part. His responsibility was the next step, and he didn't want to do it. And I would rather protect our relationship going forward into adulthood than lock horns over this every day. going forward. As a result, he has some crooked teeth again, and he hates them. He learned a huge lesson. He is full of guilt over not using the retainer. If I had battled with him, and he had straight teeth right now, and he wore the retainer every day, we might not be friends right now.
Yeah.
But I feel like we are friends. He's a young adult, and I feel like and he might not have learned. Guilt is a great teacher. It's a great barometer. We don't want shame, but guilt really teaches you that you don't want to feel that again. You don't want to make that same decision again. So that's a trap that we can fall into, thinking we need to be right and that we know what's right, and we need to make our kids understand that.
I'm so impressed. I need that story like on my wall. That must have taken such restraint at the time.
I mean, I wasn't happy, but I'm really happy now. We have a great relationship.
Yeah.
And he's so cute, you guys. The crooked teeth are not a thing, really.
One of the things you talk about in the evolve stage, so in that final stage, is triaging your fears. Yes. That was something that I really loved too, because we get caught up in all of the worries, and you can just lose yourself going down, and thinking so many different things could go wrong. I felt like this was really good practical advice, this idea of triaging your fears. Can you talk to us about this part of the process? I feel like that's so helpful for everyone to hear.
Sure.
And how that helps us move forward too.
Yeah, so I'm a worrier. So this is really written for me, by me. But we do this thing when our kids are experiencing pain and discomfort, or when they're just really in conflict with us, where our fears start to spiral, and we think, oh my gosh, this kid and I argue about everything all the time. I guess we're never going to have a relationship. I'll probably never meet my grandkids. And we spiral and spiral and spiral. Or this kid's never going to follow the rules. They'll probably not be able to hold down a job, and then, I don't know, they're going to have a criminal record. And our minds can spin out of control. And so what I encourage parents to do when you feel that is starting to happen is you make a list, and don't censor yourself. Make it as big and as fantastic as you need to be to clear these things out of your mind and get them down on paper or on your cell phone. So you've got this long list of everything you're worried about, from minor to severe. And then I want you to look at that list, and I want you to take a deep breath, and I want you to choose one of those things that you can take action on in the next 24 hours. And that's the only one that you think about right now. Everything else, give yourself some kind of a time limit on, and say, the rest of these I will look at in a week, and I'll see if I still need to worry about them. Some of them go away on their own. Some of them become a little bit bigger, might rise to the top, and then you can pick one of those to take action on. But I think our instincts are to try to just dive on all the problems at once, and we're playing whack-a-mole, and we're not being efficient, and the worries are still spinning. And it's almost like the resolve phase for the kids. If you take action on just one, and it almost doesn't matter which one, although I think the 24-hour rule is really helpful in just giving you a sense of sort of agency and progress. But if you choose just one, it can begin to help you move out of that feeling of helplessness that this is creating in your brain. I think it just tends to control the spin on these things.
Yeah. How do you pull apart the parent piece versus the child piece in this? So it seems so wrapped together, like what's up to the parent to kind of control and take the lead on, but we're trying to teach the child these steps too.
Right. So if your child is facing a situation where they are in imminent danger, where things are unsafe, I want you to get involved right away. Excuse me. I don't want you to feel like, well, we'll just sit back and see what happens. They're talking to this 35-year-old man on the internet, right? We'll just see how this plays out. Obviously, there are going to be lots of scenarios in which you will say, no, you're not climbing that tree. That limb is about to fall off. You're not going to talk to that person online. So there are plenty of times where you'll need to swoop in and just do the real thing of keeping your kids safe. So that's one thing that I want you to know, and remind me what you wanted me to get to.
Yeah, just that I think this is all of the things, all the ideas in this book, the 3 steps, the parents and the child are involved and kind of have a role in this too, and how?
Yeah, so where do you know this is a teachable moment, and where do you know I just need to let this lesson sort of teach itself? Okay. For the most part, you do not need to. I get asked all the time, like, so are we supposed to create?
Yeah, we're not. You don't want us to be making these.
I don't want you to be making things hard. There are some parents who will say, well, life's going to be hard, and you're telling me that my kid has to learn to overcome obstacles, so I'm going to make them get out in the yard, and they're going to, dig a ditch, and then we're going to fill the ditch, and then they're going to redig the ditch, right? That is not useful. Really, I think of this, and I use this analogy in the book, and I really love this. So I don't know if any of you are plant people, but probably because we went through the pandemic and everybody became a plant person. But greenhouse keepers will raise these little perfect, tender little plants in their perfect little environment of the greenhouse where everything is perfect, and the plants grow and they flourish, and that's great. And if they then took the plants and they planted them in the ground after raising them in this perfect environment, those plants would die. So they do something called hardening off the plants, where they take the little plants and they move them out of the greenhouse and they expose them to frigid temperatures and for a little while. And the plants wither up and they don't like it. And then they bring them back into the lovely greenhouse and they recoup. And every time they do that, the plant learns, oh, okay, I can fight off this freeze, and they learn it incrementally over time. And when they plant the plants out in the real world, they thrive because they have been exposed incrementally to discomfort, essentially. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I want you to do as parents. I want you to not be frightened when your child feels discomfort. You don't have to create the discomfort. The world is already cold. All you have to do is allow them out into it enough that they experience that themselves. And then your home is still the nice little greenhouse where things are safe and things are nurturing and loving and all of that. But when they tell you, I've done something bad or something bad has happened to me, then your reaction matters. So that's how you kind of create that space for them to say, oh, I'm facing a setback, I'm experiencing a challenge, but I know that my home is a place where I can talk about this and it's safe.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And I know this is a parenting book, and I've been in the education field for a really long time, so I tend to view things through that lens as well as a parenting lens now. What information do you think would be important for middle school teachers or high school teachers or upper elementary teachers to take away from this book? How can they apply these messages from your book to their classrooms?
I love that. So my big failure, my coming of age story is in the book. And it happened at school. So it was not, to be honest, I don't know if my parents knew that it happened. In short, I went to this boarding program. It was like it's called the Mountain School. It's in Vermont. It's a semester where you go and you live at the farm and you raise the animals and all this stuff. And I did not do my chores as I was supposed to, because I was 16 years old and I was tired and I slept in instead of doing the chores. I made a really bad decision because my chore was taking care of animals. And I was so selfish and so tired and so 16 that I thought it wouldn't matter if I just slept in. So this happened for just a couple days, and then the farm manager came into the dorm that I was staying in and screamed at me to come out. I was mortified in front of all of my friends there in the dorm and berated me and asked me, who did I think I was, essentially? And I was like, I have no idea. I have zero idea. And I was so upset by it. What he did that allowed me not to get stuck in a moment of real shame and allowed me to continue to go on at that program was he just forgot about it. After he told me what I needed to do, I did what he told me I needed to do, and I was on with the hard work of working on a farm, and he was on with the hard work of working on a farm, and so he did not continue to press the bruise, as I say. Mm-hmm. He moved on with it. So I think teachers have a huge ability to help kids move past failure. You can point it out, absolutely, you have to. You can be a coach, you can provide guidance on what they need to do to correct the situation. And then you're just saying, you can even say, and now we're gonna put this behind us. This isn't who you are, you made a mistake, okay, let's move on. And when you invite kids to be able to reinvent themselves like that, that is such a gift, because kids may not get that in every other part of their life. So to have one adult who says, hey, I don't see you in that way, I don't see you as that mistake, let's move past this, that's really tremendous.
Mm-hmm. And this, I know, is your book is focused on coaching parents through these setbacks and failures. If you were giving a talk to our middle schoolers, what message do you share with them?
Ooh, so I think that the Whisper Network is real good for kids too. I think it's really important for kids to find, if they don't have a peer who they want to talk about with, an adult. And so they feel like when we've created this community of adults who are willing to support each other and not judge each other's families and be really accepting, they feel more inclined to be able to talk to an adult and trust them. So I think my message would be the same. Find your person. You will feel better the moment you tell someone what's going on. And there are people who want to help you move through this and past this and put it behind you.
Yeah, that's great. I think one of the failures that you talk about, the rebel, the lure of popularity, was one of the ones that I found I could just go back to middle school and feel that.
Yeah.
Can you talk us through that one and take us through kind of the 3 steps with that particular situation?
Yes. I think.
Too much so. So that's, I feel like that's one that comes up so often, or that.
Yeah, so what she's referring to, so the Rebel chapter starts with a story that came from a friend of mine, actually.
It's such a powerful story because it lasts, I think, for a lifetime.
And it's really recognizable.
Yeah.
So the rebel fails to follow the rules, and sometimes the rules are clear-cut rules that are coming down from you as the parent. So that could be curfew, that could be take your shoes off when you walk inside the house. Sometimes the rebel breaks sort of social norms or social rules. And so it starts with an anecdote that a friend of mine told me that was she had such a desperation to be popular when she entered 6th grade, and she had a real dear friend who she loved, but some girls invited her to sort of join them at the popular table as long as she left the other friend behind. And my friend said, okay. And so she wrote a letter to this other girl saying, I don't think we should be friends anymore. I've been invited to be friends with these other people, and I really like you, but they don't think you're mature enough to come. That poor girl was heartbroken, as you can well imagine, and my friend was heartbroken after she realized what she had done. When she saw her friend's reaction, the reality of the situation hit her. She felt like it was kind of an impulsive thing, and I think she wanted it so bad, she hoped her friend wouldn't have a bad reaction to it. So she was heartbroken instantly and kept trying to apologize, but the other friend, rightfully, didn't want to talk to her, didn't want to hear the apology right then. The sort of theme that keeps coming up through the book, through all the people I talk to, is that there is a silver lining to so many of these experiences. For my friend, the silver lining is that she devoted herself to being a really good friend. The pain from that experience taught her that she never wanted to make a friend feel that way again. So for me, the silver lining was when I slept in and didn't do my chores and was mortified, what I learned is that being indulgent was never worth it if it came at someone else's expense. That I like being self-indulgent very much, but that I was never going to do it again if it was at risk of hurting someone else. So that's kind of like the theme of that Rebel Kid, is that you're making a decision, it's impulsive, there's a real pull to do this, but also you learn from the pain of those decisions.
Mm-hmm. And in that case, the contain part of that, because it looks so different when it's one of the other archetypes, if they're, they have been binge drinking with a friend. So
right.
Just to kind of compare when you're containing a situation like that, what does that look like?
So if
How do
it's
you
like
take those first steps?
Yeah, I mean, if you, what I want you to ask yourself with your child, as you're about to contain, is, do I need to contain this because it's irritating me? It's behavior that I'm finding troublesome, irritating, it's taking up a lot of my time, or do I need to contain this because it's a real safety issue? So contain if it's like a binge drinking kind of rebellion, and that's, they're breaking rules that are really unsafe, then that looks like saying, hey, we're gonna stick together in the house for a little while. And there's an example, it's another story in the book about a kid who did end up going to the hospital. His parents got a call one night, and he was taken by ambulance to the hospital at age 14. He had gone to a party, and it just overdrank way past capacity. And so containment for that kid was well beyond a weekend. That family structured it so that it was a couple months because they were worried about their child's life at that point. So it was a couple months, but what they did really well is they didn't just say, okay, 2 months and then you're sprung, you're back out in the world. They said, okay, 2 months, you're home with us after school, you're sticking around, you're not having a social life, but you sort of were getting rewarded for good behavior. And that child went through what felt like to them all of the stages of like denial and anger and, until they got to a point of acceptance. And then things were kind of nice around the house for a little while. And then that child was allowed to have friends over sometimes for dinner, and then allowed to go out with friends on the weekend during daylight hours where there was some supervision. So it was really incremental, the way that they sort of allowed that child to get back into that Bill of Rights and more independence.
I like that idea of, I think there's a step in there too where you kind of build in I can't remember how you referred to it, like build in kind of an expectation that they're going to get released early from there.
I think that's key, because what you want is not a kid who sulks in their room long enough to pass the time. What you want is a kid who gets past that to the point that you can have real conversations about what that experience was like and what they want to learn from it and what they would do differently next time. And they can't do that if they're working so hard on passing the time. But if they feel like there's reason for them to engage with you in conversation, real meaningful conversation, because that means that then their friend can come over for dinner and have family dinner with you, then that's a high value reward. So that worked really well for them.
Yeah. Again, there is just so much practical advice in here for all of us. We're all here together this evening. I know we'll have some time for Q&A, but before we do that, do you have any kind of last thoughts on how we can support each other as parents in this too?
Yes. So there is a list, would you believe it, at the back of the book of things you can do for a family if they are going through a challenge of any kind. And these are things that I learned from my own community of parent friends and from the parents in my online community. So these are things that they said really helped them when they were going through a struggle. And some of them are acts of service, so showing up with food, that sort of thing. But really what most parents wanted to hear was another parent say to them, I love your kid just the same. And no one's judging you for this, and this could be any kid, and this could be my kid. And, we're all in this together, so what can I do for you? How can I help? Do you want to go for a walk and talk? That sort of thing. It's so easy, really, to do, but we feel like, I don't want to embarrass, I don't want anybody to feel weird about it. So it's enough just to give a simple little word of encouragement.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with us here tonight, Michelle.
Thank you.